I always find it funny when folks who are accustomed to more casual shooter experiences get into something like Squad or Tarkov or Arma, and they're unsatisfied with the way that the player character moves or how
Yeah.
difficult it is to aim. And I'm like, my brother in Christ, shooting guns is not easy. And it's such an interesting challenge for developers to overcome.
Yeah.
Like that balance between accessibility and snappy movement and quick aiming versus realism. And
Yep.
that's a difficult balance to strike. And a lot of it is contingent upon the experience you want the player to have. And even in like the most hardcore tactical games, I would not argue for like extremely clunky gunplay because it's just so it's just game breaking. So you need like a healthy balance.
Welcome to Tardux, a podcast for content creators to come on and share their stories, experience, and advice. And today I am super excited. I have Control Pairs. Welcome.
What is going on? It is a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad we finally linked up.
Yes.
We've been dodging each other for a little bit, so
Yes,
I'm
we
glad
have.
it worked out.
Yeah, awesome. All right, so what we do first to get things rolling, we just do 3 random questions to get the juices flowing. Are you ready?
I am prepared.
All right, so as a little kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
A soldier. That worked out.
That did, yes. All right, favorite meal of the day?
Breakfast, presuming I have it. I'd
Yes.
say like I'm 50-50 in the breakfast department, but it is my preferred meal. And if I start off with a decent workout and a good breakfast, it's usually a good day.
And what is a good breakfast? Like bacon and eggs, or are you more like a nutritional shake guy?
I'm not crazy picky. I'm very I like it to be a large meal. Some people like ease their way into the day. I could do, if I do 1,000 calories at breakfast, like that's a big win. So pancakes, eggs, oats, yogurt, fruit, whatever, just pile it on.
Excellent.
And coffee, significant quantities of coffee.
All right. And favorite thing about where you live?
Right now it's I am in an area where I am in a small town within a 45-minute commute of a large metropolitan area. So if I go to the east, I'm in the city in 30 minutes. If I go to the west, I'm in the country in 30 minutes. So I have access to a ton of stuff. Nice. I can, I've got a lot of firearm and hunting options close to me. I've got nightlife close to me. There's lots of stuff for my family and my kids to do.
Excellent.
So it's a pretty cool little spot.
Awesome. All right. So I saw a tweet earlier today. You're out. You put a picture out. You're shooting some long guns. How was that?
Oh, it was a blast. I'm sure that's a rabbit hole we'll explore to some degree, but I've always been not as much a firearms collector, but I've shot guns my entire life. I grew up in Central and the Hill Country of Texas. Hunted a lot when I was a kid, joined the military later on. I've been around firearms my whole life.
Yeah.
I know that's a touchy subject for some folks in, today's day and age, but it was a very normal part of my childhood and has been a part of my life.
Yeah.
But recently basically took one of my old deer rifles, upgraded it to a precision rifle, and have been, really kind of pushing it a little bit. We got out to about 650 yards at a buddy's farm over the weekend, and it is dead on and driving tack. So that's a whole kind of new deal for me to explore, is kind of that long range precision stuff. Starts adding some math to the trigger pulling, which is takes me and everyone else out of their comfort zone a little bit, but it's been a blast. It's a lot of fun.
It just boggles my mind that somebody can hit somebody, a kilometer and a half away.
Yeah.
It's just, and hit a target, a moving target, or it's. And we're not talking electronics. It is, human finger and, just a bullet.
It's definitely an acquired skill. It's something that I am, reasonably practiced at mid-range and close range, something that I'm developing at long range. And, it is something that takes a long, long time to master. But there are, with given the right tools and the right training and education, I'd say, pretty much anyone could be introduced to the ability to do that. It's pretty cool.
Cool. All right. So before we go down into, your background, your story, how I found you was through a podcast when I was looking for I think I was looking for Escape from Tarkov podcast, and you came up with a scav talk, with a couple other guys. And so that's how I found you, and we haven't seen any podcasts in a while. Yeah.
I think I did 6 or 8, something like that. The goal when I launched that podcast was to do one a month. And that became essentially a bridge too far, because I'm trying to manage, being a good dad, being a good husband, working a day job, cranking out YouTube content, staying semi-frequent on my socials, having a social life of my very own, and doing all these other hobbies that I enjoy. So something had to give. Unfortunately, that was the thing that had to give, not because I don't love it or I love it any less than the other things I'm doing. But there was an input to output calculation that occurred. And a lot of people love the podcast. I got a ton of positive, feedback from it. And I enjoy doing it because you don't get a chance to really sit down and have these in-depth, detailed conversations and really get to know folks and learn more about them. And I think podcasts and long form is the perfect format to do that. And it's hopefully something I will be able to return to, within the year, is my goal.
Awesome. Yeah. It's the pods I listened to, they were fantastic. But like you said, when you're balancing so much, your YouTube content is fantastic, but it takes a lot, even the little YouTube stuff I put, it just takes a lot of time. And the stuff you have to do is a lot more time consuming.
It is a heavy lift for sure. It's something I'm passionate about and I love. And I think like all creators can relate to that. Like if you don't love it, you will never do it, or you won't do it with any regularity. And especially for me, like my road on YouTube was a long one. I mean, my YouTube channel is over 10 years old.
Wow.
I have not published to it regularly for 10 years, but I've had kind of spurts of a year or two on and off. And I have been posting regularly to it since like late 2018, early 2019. And you can't do anything with like sufficient passion for that period of time to get any sort of traction unless you love it. So luckily that is something I do love. Recently I've onboarded an editor who does about 50% of my editing work, which has been a huge help. And also kind of a leap of faith because you kind of take your hands off the wheels a little bit. But once you have kind of a rapport-based relationship with that team member, it's been pretty valuable.
Excellent. Yeah, that's got to be tough because you have a certain style you like and a certain expectations of video. Now, like you said, all right, you're sitting in the passenger seat, show me what you got.
Yeah, exactly. And fortunately, like my editor came highly recommended from a friend. I was very familiar with their work, and an editor himself was, kind of a close friend and super familiar with my style. It was like a very, very easy transition. And within a couple videos, we had a great system worked out. And that's been an enormous help for sure.
All right. So the nickname Control Pairs, where did that come from?
Yeah, super cringe, right? No, so it was an old gamer tag. And I mean, I say old gamer tag, it is very much still my online persona. So early on in my time in the service and kind of in college, I adopted that moniker online. Controlled pairs comes from the firearms community and shooting. It's just it's a method of engaging a target. It's 2 rounds fired in close succession, and you're acquiring a sight picture in between each round. So that's something when I was getting into shooting early and getting, early in my career in the service, that stood out to me. I liked kind of this, the idea that you could precisely engage a target, but you could do it quickly, acquiring a sight picture rapidly twice. And so like, I just kind of grabbed it and ran with it from there.
Nice. Excellent. So how would you describe sort of your content? For me, you're a first person shooter, sort of milsim content creator.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I kind of label it as combat simulation and tactical shooters. Most of my content of late has been first person. I really got traction and started to see growth on the channel when I started to cover Door Kickers 2. Task Force North was a top-down isometric tactical planning game. And I basically used that environment to explain how my brain processes close quarters battle engagements. And just treated it sort of like an infotainment opportunity, not trying to train anybody how to go out and clear buildings, but just to explain how a military brain might look at that problem and break it down and work through the problem. And people seem to really respond positively to kind of those explainer style gameplay videos as I work through them, and really kind of exponentially grew the channel over the course of about a year. And since then, growth has been steady, and I've, further expanded into more first-person shooters, a lot of virtual reality stuff as of late as well. But anything that is kind of grounded in realism, requires teamwork, cooperative in nature, competitive occasionally, with a lot of attention to detail are kind of the games that really stand out to me.
Oh, cool. All right. And now, before you created your first videos for YouTube, you started down that path. What's your background?
So yeah, I hit like I grew up in the country in Texas, and I ended up going to college and then going into the Army. I was a ROTC candidate through college, commissioned into active duty as an infantry officer, and kind of did what those who are familiar with that path is a pretty typical infantry officer path. So went down to Fort Benning, and now we're talking like 11 years ago now. It's been a lifetime. But went through the infantry officer basic course, went to Ranger school. I went to airborne school as a young cadet. And from there, kind of followed the usual trajectory.
Yeah.
I led a couple of platoons, a rifle platoon, a scout platoon. Eventually went to a special operations selection. That's the Ranger Assessment and Selection Program. And found my way over to the 75th Ranger Regiment.
Wow.
And served there at 2 different stints for a total of about 5 years, leading Ranger strike forces and doing that stuff. And over the course of all that, went overseas a whole bunch. I did 5 separate deployments to all over kind of the CENTCOM and the usual hotspots you would expect, but it was a wild ride. Had an absolute blast. Served with the best human beings on planet Earth, as far as I'm concerned, and had some pretty formative experiences that I'll always remember and be grateful for sure.
Well, first of all, let me thank you for your service, because it's a special individual to answer that call and take on that career. What was your calling for it? What did your family do it before, or you just had an interest in doing that?
Sure. So I appreciate you saying that, and I know just to hit it real quick, folks say thank you for your service a lot, and it's kind of like, is that a cringe question? Is that a cringe thing to say? I don't think that it is. I don't think it's necessary per se, but I do appreciate you taking the time to say it, and it does mean a lot. My family did not directly serve. I had some extended family that did. I was in middle school on 9/11.
Yeah.
I was at that point. I had actually moved from Texas. I was in the Northern Virginia area. I was pretty. I had friends that were directly affected by the events at the Pentagon. I remember being young, watching it all unfold on TV. I watched all of our lives change pretty significantly after that, of course. And that was sort of the trigger for me to begin exploring service, because I felt called in response to that event, to rise to the occasion, because the nation was in need of volunteers, and I was approaching the time where it would be appropriate for me to volunteer. So that was really kind of the impetus for it, and that stayed true, all the way through. As I was leaving high school and deciding between college and just enlisting, I was tending towards enlisting. My family, based off my ability to get an ROTC scholarship and doing a decent job in high school, encouraged me to go get a degree and go the officer route. So I did. And at the time, I was thinking I might miss this thing, like that boyish adolescent fear that I might miss the fight, which in hindsight is just so silly. But I think all young men are inclined, well, not all, but many young men are inclined to have that drive or that desire. So I was worried I was going to miss it. Turned out that was not a concern that I needed to have. And, the conflict that our nation was involved in ended up going pretty dang long. And, I became pretty invested in it and spent a large portion of my 20s, pretty, deeply engaged in it.
Oh, wow. All right. Well, let's move on to video games. Let's, channel over that way. So when did video games start for you?
Forever ago, man. I think like anyone who does this long enough probably started pretty early. So I was exposed to games as a very young kid. I played the regular Nintendo. I remember playing Duck Hunt in my grandpa's, trailer when I was like 5 years old. Got an N64 about the same time I got dial-up internet in my house when I was, probably elementary school sometime.
Yeah.
And got a gaming PC in middle school. Started playing like the original Counter-Strike, like V1.6, Day of Defeat, which is
that's a classic.
a Counter-Strike mod at the time. and kind of just went from there. And my interest was always more towards like the simulation, kind of hardcore tactical shooter style of games. So early Ghost Recon, early SWAT games, 2, 3, 4, and you name it from there. And it kind of just has escalated over the years. I didn't really have any interest in sharing that stuff early on. Of course, YouTube didn't exist, when I was young and being exposed to that stuff for the first time. And then, Arma, the first time I posted to YouTube was when Arma 3 was in its alpha stage. So they had like an open alpha that was available on Steam. I was having a blast in it and trying to convince my friends to play it. And they were like, no, man, we don't want to play some walking simulator like every other game you play. And I was like, yeah, I get that. But that is a fair critique.
Yeah.
But I started using like Fraps, which was a video capture software at the time, and just recording clips and posting them basically raw to the channel that is now Controlled Pairs Gaming. And, then I noticed, hey, people are actually watching this. Like 30 people watched my video. I've got 30 views and like one guy commented and, and so I was like, oh, this is cool. People actually are interested. And so I saw it then at that point more of as a creative outlet, which led me to continue pursuing it off and on really for the last, 10 years.
Yeah. Oh man. And that, had you had any editing experience, or like you said, you bought the Fraps card and just sort of taught yourself from there?
Yeah, it was all self-taught, which I think is, pretty common these days.
Yeah.
It was tough early on because there were no resources to get you going. So it was really just trial and error. And I think probably for months, I probably still had like that Fraps frame rate counter on the corner of my screen, and because I didn't want to purchase the actual software.
Yeah.
But yeah, all self-taught, and I'm certainly still no expert, but at least reasonably competent now. I think what I do, in 6 hours would take my editor 1 hour, but we still get it done.
And now over the years, what have some of the, your favorite games that really stick out to you? Is like, yeah, that was, those are top tier games for me.
Yeah. Specific to the ones that I've covered, the first game that like I started covering a lot of was Postscriptum. I don't know if you're familiar, but a World War II tactical shooter made by OWI, same folks made by Periscope Games, which ended up getting not bought out by, but was published by OWI. And it's squad in World War II, essentially. And I think I posted Postscriptum almost exclusively for like a year straight. I still think it's probably, and this is kind of Hell Let Loose exists now, so this is a contentious statement. It is still my preferred World War II game because of its emphasis on teamwork that Hell Let Loose still requires, but Hell Let Loose kind of operates more in Zerg fashion than it does by, fire and maneuver. I think Postscriptum is much more of a fire and maneuver experience and does a great job illustrating that. So Postscriptum certainly stands out. Outside of like the shooter and like tactical world, Kerbal Space Program is my all-time favorite game, and I've said that publicly before, which catches some folks by surprise. But I'm definitely like a space nerd, and more than that, it's just a elegantly designed simulation that takes an extraordinarily complex topic, and that is space travel and literal rocket science, and it makes it accessible to the absolute novice. And I learned everything I know, which admittedly is not much, about orbital mechanics and rocket science from Kerbal Space Program, but I can at least have a semi-intelligent conversation about it at this point. So that game's a blast, and it's also a creative sandbox. You can build whatever you want, which kind of makes limitless replayability. Door Kickers 2, certainly up there as well. And simply for what it did for my channel, what it did for that game, the relationship I have with those developers. And I'm really looking forward to when that title goes into full release, I'm able to really dive back in and sink my teeth into it again. And then of late, it's this niche virtual reality stuff. It's, it was Onward for a little bit. Onward's kind of risen and now fallen. And recently it's been Tactical Assault VR, this like very niche indie project made by a solo developer who has become a friend. That was a Quest App Lab project that is now also in PC VR on Steam. And it nails everything I want in a CQB oriented cooperative tactical shooter. And it puts in a virtual reality environment, which is something that I've been screaming for years, probably.
Yeah.
Just years. And there's some promising stuff on the horizon, but kind of if I'm going through like the echelons of my time on YouTube, those
Yeah.
are the ones that really stand out.
And now, speaking of YouTube, was there a certain point where videos were starting to click and like, you thought, yep, this is a good thing. I can make good revenue from this.
Sure.
Could be a potential, career. Was that the, door kickers videos, or was there along the way other videos that sort of started ramping up?
There's been a few. There was a few like offshoots prior to door kickers that popped off without explanation. I think I was sitting like below 10,000 subscribers when I published my first door kickers video, and that was only like 2.5, 3 years ago. I mean, it has not been that long. Before that video, I think the biggest project I had was in Squad. And maybe this might have been right around the same time as door kickers. It's hard to say if it was first or not, but I published a video in Squad highlighting when they released the Fallujah map. And I had just a really cinematic gameplay sequence that I think I got lucky on title thumbnail combo, and then a very cinematic sequence that I happened to capture. Nothing skill based about it. It was just like right place, right time, right camera angle. And that really resonated with viewers. It did 500,000+ views. And then the developers reached out and actually asked to use that clip in their release gameplay trailer. So that's a clip that's featured in their trailers. That was kind of like a cool moment along the way that would happen surely by accident. And it was also something that I was unable to replicate.
Yeah.
And what I found prior to door kickers was, and I think most creators would say the same, is YouTube is a platform now where posting gameplay is not sufficient. You must do something to distinguish yourself from others, not because you should be competing with your peers. I don't think that's the case. But you do need to find a way to stand out and deliver value to your viewers in a way that is something that they have not seen before.
Yeah.
There's a lot of places to go watch just raw gameplay with some music thrown over it. And that just doesn't typically cut it anymore. You might catch some traction if you hit an update or you're the first in your niche to hit a specific game. But those opportunities are fleeting and they are difficult to continue to reproduce. So the door kickers videos really stood out. There wasn't a ton of people making door kickers videos. There wasn't anyone making them in the same way that I was making them and using them as an opportunity to introduce doctrinal concepts and tactics that I had been exposed to in my service in that environment. So I think those videos did extremely well. They still do, frankly. Like if all I did was post door kickers videos all day, I would be beyond what I'm at right now. But again, like this is something I do for fun.
Yeah.
And as much as I love door kickers, I played every single level multiple times and made 100 videos on it. And I can go back and mine their like random room generator stuff for days, but I also want to make sure that I am loving what I'm doing as much as my audience. So as soon as their next update comes back, that's exactly what I'm going to go back and start hitting again.
Well, and you made a good point there about, it's gameplay is one thing, but being able to add your expertise onto it. I think that's something that's missed on a lot of content, and people like me and other people that enjoy these type of games, where else are we going to get that? We don't have any experience with, the knowledge and the training that, you have, and okay, here's why we're doing this, or here's, here's how we take an angle on entering a room. That's just fantastic content.
Yeah, I think it's interesting content. It's there's a lot of places to go and get it now, I would say. Not because they're copying me necessarily, but just there's a lot of people with experience out there, offering those things up. But I do think everyone needs to find a way to figure out their value proposition. And that's mine. Like figure out what games you love and then figure out what other skills you have that synergize with that thing that you love.
Yeah.
Mold them together and deliver that to your audience. I kind of on a whim jumped on door kickers. I was talking to one of my moderators in Discord and I was like, hey, have you seen this game? Like, is it worth me like cranking out a couple videos on it? And in that first day, I recorded 3 videos in a batch, like one level and then another level and then another level. And I released them 3 days in a row, back to back to back. And they all did extraordinarily well. And I was like, okay, there's something here. And it was odd because then I noticed like if I published door kickers gameplay without me, jacking my jaws, no one watched it. No one cared.
Yeah.
But as soon as I added the explanation over the top and I explained my thought process and how I was looking at a problem, and solving that problem with my viewers, it introduced the value, and that's what folks kept coming back for.
Yeah, absolutely. And now, when that first video hit, were you like, holy crap, is because, you're thinking about 500,000 people, have watched your video. That's,
Sure.
crazy.
It's weird for sure. And then I think like, and I had folks at my day job saying, "Hey, saw your video. Didn't realize like you were making videos on YouTube." And that happens with regularity at this point.
Yeah.
It's not something I like I don't walk around with Controlled Pairs merch like at work every day. But it's also not something like I conceal. So whenever someone like stumbles across it, it's always like a funny conversation. And it's always an extremely supportive conversation. They're always excited about it and want to talk about it or share it, which I think is awesome. So when the first video kind of popped off, and I had people reaching out on Discord and, various social media platforms. And it is exciting. Also maybe a little anxiety inducing. Like, what are the second and third order effects of this? Am I going to have freaking stalkers dropping into my inbox?
Right.
Are people going to try and, dox me and show up at my house? Some of that's just like paranoia and unnecessary. And probably just a result of like the way that my brain works given my background. But it is exciting, and it's been a hell of a ride since then. I'm pretty inoculated to that at this point. Many of my content creator friends are far more successful than I have been. And, I admire them a great deal. And it's just so critical to like whatever notoriety you get access to in the internet or elsewhere in life, like just be a good person. Like, don't let that go to your head. You see egos pop up every once in a while, and it's like, guys, we're playing video games on the internet and making videos for people. Like, it's not be proud of your accomplishments. Don't let it go to don't let it go to your head.
Absolutely. And now, what's been the tougher things about, trying to make good content for YouTube and get it to take?
It's, everything is hard about it, frankly. And it doesn't get easier. Like, I think, and it's funny, I follow Mr. Beast because we all do. And that's what you do. If you make content, you follow Mr. Beast. And he posted something on Twitter this week talking about the amount, not complaining about, but just sharing the amount of strain and pressure he is under, having grown his business to the scale that it is at now, being responsible for multitudes of employees and, 6-figure revenue, and the ad deals and everything else. And so, and he shared that despite all of that success, he is still struggling constantly with title, thumbnail, video subject, video pacing, audience retention, click-through rate. Like, we're all thinking about the same stuff. And to a certain degree, it's like, one, you just have to have a natural talent for it. And if you don't have a natural talent for those things, you have to have an abundance of time to experiment and invest in it. I do not have a natural talent for it by any means, nor do I have the time to invest in it. And so I end up doing a lot of experimenting, and where I see success, I try to double down on it. I've noticed, really in the last 6 months, especially with the way that YouTube's search and discovery system works, that title and thumbnail matters more now than it ever has in the past. I think that, you hear a lot of people say our audience, attention spans are like that of goldfish. I don't think that is true. I think our audience expectations are sky high because there is an abundance of extraordinarily high quality content that they could be watching instead of yours. So when a viewer has the opportunity, to watch one of my videos or watch, one of my buddy Drewskie's videos. Drewskie is an extraordinarily talented storyteller and narrator and editor, and everything he makes is stunning visually, and it's extraordinarily compelling. And so I have to, with everything I, create, be like, all right, there is top tier stuff out here made by excellent people. What makes my content different or better or more worthy of their time? And figuring out what that is, and then crafting that piece of content, and then telling them this is the one, and you tell them with the title and the thumbnail. That's the biggest challenge. It's like figuring out what they want to watch and actually doing the hard work of crafting it in a way that it is consumable and watchable, and then figuring out what you call that thing and what's going to earn the click, and how you illustrate that click through the thumbnail. And it's a terribly challenging burden, but it is also pretty exciting and fun to experiment with.
Cool. How do you approach, what is your sort of concept from, sort of concept to like and subscribe essentially? What is your, do you have an idea, or do you play some, play the door kickers? Like, all right, let me dig into this and make some videos from that, or, what's your workflow?
For like gaming stuff or range stuff, or just
Both.
all of it?
Yeah, all in general. Like, do you have a typical
Sure.
workflow you go through when you come up with an idea? Okay, I'm going to make a video.
Yeah, I keep a running list of ideas on my phone in a notepad. And then I am unfaithful to those ideas more often than I am faithful to them. The ideas are most excellent, I promise. However, a lot of them require a ton of time and effort, and I have the effort, I don't have the time. So I know, on my to-do list is I need to do an airsoft kit breakdown, because I went to an airsoft event a few months back. The content I produced from it did extraordinarily well. Big follow-up from the audience was like, tell us what you're taking out there. Like, what kind of gear do I need to go and enjoy that experience in the way that you did? We've seen you play all these VR shooters and talk about the decisions and stuff you're doing. And then we got to see you go do it with a GoPro, which is pretty cool. Now tell me like the tools I need to go do that. So like there's an obvious opportunity for me to share that stuff, and then also like share the through affiliate marketing and revenue, like have the opportunity to have this additional income stream and promote brands that I have great relationships with and admire. But doing that takes significant time. I've got to like move lighting around in my house and like set up a little studio area and get my DSLR out, and like all the work that goes into it, not to mention how difficult it is to edit video from a camera as opposed to gameplay. So what I do is I typically have, all these ideas in my phone. And if I see the time on a weekend or a long weekend or a vacation time where I can squeeze one of those in, I do it. And then other than that, it's like, what games am I playing right now that are doing well? What are new angles I can use in those games? Have they got new updates recently that I can share with my audience? Have I discovered a new game that I need to tell my audience about because I'm passionate about it and I want that game to do well? And then sometimes it's like, I have to switch off my content creator brain and just turn on my recreational brain and say, go to my friends on Discord and say, guys, like, I just want to drink a beer and chill tonight. Like, let's just play something for fun. I'll record it. And if it is worthwhile, I will share it.
Yeah.
And inevitably, like, those nights are typically my favorite. I have a blast with my buddies, playing games, drinking beer, hanging out. And those videos do terrible because it's gameplay.
Right.
you know? And I know that going in. But if it was all about clicks and views and making money, then I would be taking this whole thing from a different approach.
Yeah, absolutely. And now, over the years, what have been some of the highlights, since you started making content? Any particular video that you're really proud of, or some moments that happened?
Yeah, I think like the biggest one, and it's one of many highlights, but it's like the friends I've made. Yeah. I did not have a Discord server or a regular group of gamer friends until a subscriber encouraged me to make a Discord server in like 2020. Mm-hmm. And I was like, fine, like I'll do it. I don't have time for this, but I'll do it. So I created a Discord server, and then, I got 30, 40, 50 people join it. And then, I needed a moderator. So like one of my regulars, I was like, hey man, I don't have time for this. You're in Europe, I'm in the US. We can like offset time zones and just make sure people aren't posting grotesque nonsense in my Discord. Yeah. So onboarded him as a moderator and has become an extraordinarily close friend. And that's Abu Yusuf. He's in my videos all the time. Folks probably recognize his name. And he's still there. And like, he's been a close friend for years. And that small, the two of us grew into others. And it's, Grover, Rover. And I'm just saying these names for folks who might be listening from my videos. But from, Grover and Minnow and Hypoxia and Gunbird and G-Man, like this core group of people have become my friends. And we talk in Discord, we text each other, we share the burdens of our day-to-day life. And, these digital friendships that we have are very much real friendships. And, it's over the last couple of years, so about a year and change ago, February of 2022 is when we got together for that range day. And we made a, kind of like a little mini doc thing about it. And that was the first time we all got together. We couldn't bring Abu over from Europe, although we'll probably try to do that in the future. And then, Karkakut came out, and then all my mods, and just Chris, and just close friends. And we spent the weekend hanging out, introducing some of them to firearms for the first time, and just getting to know each other and spending time in person together. So like that's certainly the biggest highlight for me, was probably that event and those friendships. And then there's been some other ones along the way. There's, that when that squad video went big and like all of a sudden my little clip is in their launch trailer, like that's pretty crazy. My first sponsorship deal with a game, where make a couple $100 promoting a game I love, and developing a friendship with a developer who I admire, and that was Blackfoot Studios and Ground Branch.
Yeah.
And since then, like, those opportunities have become more and more common. I still don't take a single one of them for granted, and try to do my best on everything I'm willing to work on. I developed a friendship and did some free consulting with my buddy Taylor McCubbin, who runs a company called Chimera XR. They are a virtual reality training platform for law enforcement and military. So it's kind of taken some of my expertise in the digital world and from my experience in the military, and providing that feedback to him on his product, so he can design a system that'll help keep cops and soldiers safe.
Yeah.
Which is a relationship I'm proud to have as well.
That's really cool.
And there's been just a myriad of little things like that.
Yeah.
Going to an airsoft event for the very first time and someone recognizing me, like the first time you get spotted in public, and this was after I had revealed my face for the first time. And, young kid who enjoys my YouTube video asking me to, sign his airsoft gun with a paint marker.
Shoot,
like,
no way.
It's like, it's silly. It's cheesy to an extent, but it's like, it's flattering and it's fun.
Exactly.
And it makes you feel that people are actually, getting some value and enjoying the stuff that you're kind of pouring yourself into and working hard on. So yeah, there's just a few.
Excellent. And now, you said you just, a face reveal was recently, just particular reason you did that instead of the earlier videos? Yeah,
it's been, I guess, about a year and change ago now I revealed my face. And the reason for that was I left special operations.
Oh, okay.
So that's kind of like the big secret. It was like during a lot of that time I was still in, working kind of sensitive jobs.
Yeah.
Nothing, too crazy, and also nothing I can discuss in a ton of detail. But I was in a place where it would not be appropriate to reveal who I am.
Gotcha.
And now I'm in a place where that's okay.
All right. So now you brought up the your video, can gamers shoot real guns? I love that video. First of all, when you see somebody who's never shot a real gun before, that smile, that grin is just like that shit-eating grin. It's like, oh my God. It's just so cool to see.
I'm extremely proud of it. Like, if you go back to like projects that stand out, I know that you kind of raised that question before. That video is probably the single, the single project that I am most proud of, for sure, because it represents all those friendships. It was certainly like a pretty significant achievement for my channel. And it wasn't even on my channel. Like, I moved it over to a second channel because guns, and YouTube freaks out. But despite that, like, it still did a couple 100,000 views on a channel that had, like, at the time, a couple hundred subscribers, which is pretty absurd, frankly. And it opened up a ton of doors in the, the firearms industry, and that have, I've been, talking to different folks in that arena now as a result of that video. But yeah, what a cool opportunity just to bring friends together for the first time, introduce some new shooters to firearms for the first time, allow more intermediate and advanced shooters to kind of show off these firearms that they have built themselves. I say built themselves, like, people freak out. Like, no, they didn't like drill out a gun at their house. They like purchased the pieces and put them together. That's firearms collectors building firearms. So extremely cool, something that I'm really, passionate about. I'm certainly a Second Amendment advocate in that regard, and that was an awesome opportunity for outreach. I think games are an excellent avenue for outreach. I also think that we need positive role models in gaming, introducing young people to firearms for the first time. I aspire to be one of those people, for sure. I think there is a lot of ways to go about firearms ownership, and I try to promote what I see as a responsible and safe means of going about firearms ownership. I think that individuals have a responsibility to be able to defend themselves and their community and their family, and they need to have the tools and the requisite expertise and training to do that. So it's not enough to just, go out and buy guns because guns are cool. It's about like owning the right firearms, understanding how to use them, understanding the safety measures that go into employing that tool safely, understanding the laws in your area so you know when, where, how, if you can use force. God forbid you're ever placed in that kind of situation. And it's about, getting the right kind of training to be able to use it. So like those are things I'm extraordinarily passionate about. I'm lucky that I've got, even a little platform to be able to kind of share those thoughts and share them with my viewers, both on the gaming side and on the firearm side.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of bleed over. Like there's a ton of synergy in like the tactical shooter kind of space in the firearms community that I have found.
What made you come up with the concept of it? Was it just, you had these friends, you guys wanted to get together and sort of, know, show them how to use guns?
Yeah. So some of us, we're pretty into firearms to begin with. And one of our mutual friends in the server is in the industry and has access to a private range. We were talking about a get together and like, hey, are we gonna get together and play games? We just want to get an Airbnb and go camping. Like, what are we gonna do? And when we learned about that private range, and he shared that he would be able to give us access to it, like that was the obvious choice.
Yeah.
And so we, defaulted to that, kind of came up with what the weekend looked like, developed a general like course of fire and everything else. And then tried to balance like, I want to hang out with my friends and have a blast and make that the priority. I'd also love to capture it and share it with my audience. So it was like juggling cameras and getting all the shots and, all that sort of stuff as best we could without it actually interfering with what we were trying to do, which was have a blast.
Yeah. And it's, taking one person to the range who's never shot before is like, sort of, anxious and whatnot, but taking strangers you've never met, your stress level must have been like up here, or were you comfortable?
I was comfortable after day one.
Yeah.
Going into it, it's like, I love these people to death, but I have never met them before.
Right.
And until we actually got together, and I was immediately at ease when we all like linked up at the Airbnb the night before our first day at the range, and it was just like nothing was awkward, nothing had changed. Like it was just like, oh man, it's so good to see you. Like big hugs and high fives and like just all the good things. But there's no doubt I felt responsible for it. Not only like did I want everyone to have a great time as sort of like the orchestrator, and I resourced quite a bit for it.
Yeah.
And then, but I also wanted to be safe and like everyone would have an appreciation for what we were doing. So I was, I treated it like a day at the range, in the Army, and like I did the full on like safety brief, eye pro, ear pro, gloves. Do you understand how to operate this weapon? Keep it oriented downrange at all times. Don't point it at anything you don't want to shoot. Understand your target and what's beyond your target. Keep your finger off the trigger until you're prepared to fire the weapon. If you don't know how to use that weapon, someone who does is going to be standing next to you and introducing you to it the entire time. And so we approached it very deliberately, and it was in my opinion the right way to do it.
Yeah.
You can show up and just like shoot machine guns with zero experience, and you'll probably be okay. But I do not recommend it. There's certainly a best practice when it comes to introducing folks to firearms, and especially because that first experience is going to be a flashbulb memory for them. And you want to demonstrate what right looks like the very first time, so that every time they go to the range from then on out, they're going to replicate those behaviors and the good habits that they observed, and hopefully not the bad habits. Should you have done it incorrectly.
I like that that description, flashbulb memory. That's a great way to describe those moments, those events.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now you also added a whole nother level of coolness. You guys were shooting at night with some NVGs.
Yeah. And I thought that was important for gamers, right? Because in all these games we play, there's nods and there's lasers and there's guns. But that is a rare experience for civilians, and it shouldn't be. Civilians can go buy nods, they can go buy body armor. And if you feel like you need those things, you should go buy them. I have those things, and it's just such a rare opportunity. So luckily we had some of that equipment on hand. Obviously I have a lot of experience operating under nods and shooting under nods. So it was really, really cool to be able to introduce that to them for the first time. And it was, we weren't doing a live fire exercise.
Yes.
We were on a flat range, moving laterally and forward and backwards in a very controlled space. But they got to shoot with IR lasers, overt lasers, white light. We had automatic, we had machine guns, like fully automatic weapons out there. And they got hands on a ton of different stuff. And we sort of worked our way up from like this is an AR-15, this is a
Yes.
pistol, and then culminated with like, this is a machine gun at nighttime. Like, but it was cool. It was about as good as it gets for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And now, overall, was everybody, just like thrilled at the end of it? They're like, what a great weekend. And
Yeah, I think like the dopamine levels were high
Yeah.
across the board. Yeah, and there's like we took one group photo like right at the end of our last night at the range, and it's pitch dark out, and there's my truck's headlights are just like blasting on us.
Yeah.
Like I got them all to sign one of our targets that was just like absolutely shredded, and it was just big smiles.
Excellent.
And at that point, so Bluedrake showed up on the second day. So he ended up being out there. Karkakut was out there. All the mods that I shared, our range host and a couple of his buddies, and just like a pretty phenomenal crew.
Yeah.
It was cool.
And often when somebody gets an AR for the first time, and the weight of it is surprising.
Mhm.
People don't realize how heavy
Yeah.
these weapons are, and it's for gamers especially. They're like, holy crap! And now you add in like, can you imagine what it's like to run, maneuver, and
Yes.
it's a different
And
thing.
I think I encourage developers all the time to get hands-on if they're creating first-person shooters or any sort of tactical game. We've invited developers out and provided demos and stuff like that before. It's just so critically important to the creative process for doing that, because people just don't have an appreciation for it. I mean, you're holding a tool that is designed to contain a small explosion inches away from your face. So yes, it is heavy. It is made of hard metals, and it gets hot and smoky and has a smell to it when you pull the trigger. And I always find it funny when folks who are accustomed to more casual shooter experiences get into something like Squad or Tarkov or Arma, and they're unsatisfied with the way that the player character moves or how difficult it is to aim. And I'm like, my brother in Christ, shooting guns is not easy. And it's such an interesting challenge for developers to overcome.
Yeah.
Like that balance between accessibility and snappy movement and quick aiming versus realism. And that's a difficult balance to strike. And a lot of it is contingent upon the experience you want the player to have. And even in like the most hardcore tactical games, I would not argue for like extremely clunky gunplay, because it's just so it's just game breaking. So you need like a healthy balance.
Yeah. And also the other aspect of that too with these games is you want a healthy balance of immersion and realism. You depending on the style, like if you're going for a true sim, then that's you really put the the realism in. But for a lot of games, they miss it sometimes, trying to balance that immersion with realism, where they just take it over the top, and it's like it loses what they're trying to do.
100%. We see that in like the simulation industry as well. Too much of a good thing is a bad thing, as it turns out. And like if I model, if I accurately model stamina in Arma 3, we all know how punishing that feels, which is why virtually all Milsim groups either use a mod to change the way that stamina functions, or they turn it off altogether.
Yeah.
Because walking at 1 kilometer per hour on a 10-kilometer offset HLZ infill is not an acceptable player experience.
Right.
And there is certainly a balance between immersion and realism. I keep coming back to Arma because it is the most obvious commercial simulation. But then you compare that to a game like Ready or Not, which nails immersion, the sound, the ambiance, the sound design, especially the voiceover lines, the environmental effects, the suppression effects, the blood on screen, the debris in the air, the dust in the air, like that stuff just is incredible for immersion. And people call Ready or Not an extremely realistic game. It's up there, but it is not a full-on simulation. It is very much still a game.
Mm-hmm.
And the ballistics model is good, but it's not Arma good. And the radio communications are all done for you, and there's not a comprehensive medical system in it yet. Like the ACE Interact model that we would see in Arma. So it does a pretty good job of balancing like the immersion factor and the realism factor, in my opinion.
Yeah. And now, we talked a little bit about, VR. So VR is finally taken that step away from sort of novelty and just, those sort of cake, they're just cookie cutter games, where now we're really seeing it in industries. We're seeing it for, sports training, whether it's tennis, hockey, things like that.
Yep.
I see it in we're in the career I'm in, where they're doing like, for factories. People are able to throw on a VR headset and model what it's like to build this truck, and how are,
Yeah.
positioning things. And now in your world with, training, from a
Yeah.
training aspect, it's getting there and it's a viable tool.
Yeah, 100%. It is coming of age for certain. It's had plenty of missteps on the way. It has not been a clean process. But we're finally seeing apps on mobile headsets that don't suck.
Yeah.
And we're seeing PC VR become more affordable, and we're seeing more games coming to PC VR that are actually games rather than just a physics sandbox. The VR project I am, currently most invested in is Tactical Assault VR, which we spoke to earlier briefly. The one I am most excited about is a game called Geronimo, being made by a pair of developers, which is a direct action special operations, tactical shooter, first person kind of simulation experience. They're very much going for the ground branch style vibe in a virtual reality environment. It looks extremely promising. I've been tied in with those developers closely since they announced, and they've been just so receptive to feedback, to the point where like we're making recommendations in our little private chat and we're seeing them implemented in days. I mean, it's pretty insane. So I'm extremely excited to see that thing come to fruition.
Yeah. The one that caught my attention recently is one that I think you got invited down to Florida for. Was the Ghost of Tabor. That thing looks really cool.
Yeah, and going back to like the major highlights in my nerd life, like that's definitely up there too. So Ghost of Tabor is an extraction shooter in VR, cross-platform on the Quest, on PC VR, and come into PS VR 2. I think that's the right sequence of letters and numbers. Later this year, and it is it's Tarkov in VR. And it is a freaking blast. The developers invited my wife and I down to Orlando at Full Sail University for their launch party. Got a chance to do an interview down there, hang out with the developer, had dinner with the CEO. It was phenomenal. Lots of great creators, got to hang out on the red carpet and like just do the schmoozy thing. And it was a blast. I mean, like, it's awesome to take my wife out on a date and get all fancy for the night, especially for something that's that cool of a project. And that has been really, really fun. It's hard, it's punishing. Like Tarkov is already a panic attack on a PC, and as soon as you put that headset on, I mean, it is equal parts terrifying and fun for sure. And all those same, like the gear fear and the adrenaline, like all of that stuff is still there in VR. The maps are like surprisingly large and complex for VR. And it adds a whole new element in player interaction when you can actually like see their hands and their body language and talk to them. I shared a video where I was betrayed basically on extract. So like me and a buddy bumped into a random, looted and hung out together for the whole match. He seemed very friendly. We're moving to extract. My buddy extracts right in front of me. I'm like 5 seconds behind him, walk into the extract. And all of a sudden, this guy who we'd been friends with for 15 minutes started shooting me in the back. Luckily, I had plates on, and I was able to like turn around, draw, and mag dump him before he killed me. And I managed to take his stuff and leave. And it was wild playing it back, because then we noticed like this guy's body language was sketchy the entire time. He was putting me in front of him. He was walking behind me. He stayed in my periphery. He was trying to distract us by faking conversations with people that weren't actually there.
Oh, shoot.
It was wild. So yeah, it's a amazing experience. If you've got a PC VR headset, especially, it's worth the investment.
And now let me ask you this. So, being a soldier, playing that game, did your heart rate get elevated playing that game? Were you like, holy cow? Or was it just like, it was a fun experience?
Yeah, no, I certainly get excited still. I also want to, like, I'm eager for that to happen, and it's not something I fight. I'd say like certainly in real life and also in digital experiences, like I pride myself at being able to stay cool under pressure, getting excited, having a blast, enjoying that excitement for the sake of it being a game and allowing it to immerse me and having fun. But also being able to communicate under pressure, make decisions, make a call, and like try to win a fight and get out alive. And it presents exactly that dilemma, and it's great at doing it.
Yeah, actually, that's another thing you just actually hit a good point on: communication. What since I discovered Tarkov, the one thing it really showed me is, as humans, we suck at communication. Where am I? I'm by the tree, or he's over there. you know, you with the training when you're playing, you know, the milsim games, and does it give you the advantage because you have the comms, the tactics down? Do you see a noticeable difference between how you play versus, you know, sort of gamers play?
Yeah, like I don't credit myself that specifically. Certainly, like some of my experiences influence that heavily.
Yeah.
But it's really it's everyone I play with. Like the people I play with regularly. Like half of them are service members or prior service members or cops. And those that aren't are like have been with our group for so long, like that they are just like very well meshed in. So
Yeah.
you'll like in any of the VR videos, especially you watch us play, we're pretty dialed in. You know, we certainly make errors.
Yeah.
But the comms are usually really tight. A lot of brevity and you know, using common language in ways that we're accustomed to communicating with one another,
Yeah.
using pro words where appropriate to, you know, rapidly communicate complex data, and our kind of like our TTPs, the way we move, how we enter buildings, all that sort of stuff is at this point either from just doing it so much, it's kind of a combination of doing it so much and the training that a lot of us have.
Yeah.
It just flows really, really well.
All right. What does TTP mean?
Sorry, tactics, techniques, and procedures.
There we go. Okay, cool. I learned something.
There you go. Acronyms. Sorry.
No worries. So now the community, you know, you talked about Karkakut, Bluedrake, Drewskie. How did you end up, you know, hooking up and meeting with those guys?
Yeah, I guess that's another funny flashbulb memory of mine. I was a fan of Karkakut for a long time. He's probably, I mean, he's one of my best friends in the world now. We've hung out, you know, many times at this point in person. And I was a fan of his, and then I ended up in a game of squad with him and was like kind of starstruck that he would allow a peasant like me to share a squad with him on the internet. And that kind of like we ended up just chit chatting. He saw a few of my videos, ended up playing some postscriptum together. And then over time, just that kind of turned into a friendship. You know, ended up talking. I reached out to him for just general like content creator advice stuff. And I've always considered him a mentor in that space. And since then, we've collaborated just on a ton of stuff. You know, he's put together what I consider to be, you know, the most authentic representation of a direct action raids in a game that I've ever seen, with his COG operations group, Milsim, that works in Arma 3. And, you know, I kind of showed him how an op board works and, you know, helped him put together like his brief and helped him with some mission design stuff and, you know, different kit selections and things like that.
Yeah.
So, you know, if I'm able to help him in those ways, that's fantastic. He's always there. If, you know, we've sat down and gone through my analytics and looked at, you know, why is my channel doing good? Why is it doing bad? And it's just been an awesome friendship. Got tied in with Bluedrake kind of through Karkakut, kind of because like I made videos about him a long time ago that were kind of memey and funny.
Yeah.
And we laugh about it, you know, now. He and I linked up down at a conference in Florida a few years back. And that was the first time I'd met him. And then of course saw him again at the range day. We keep in touch, you know, every once in a while. But there's not a ton of us, you know, there's only so many folks in the niche. And I think everyone kind of knows everyone to some degree. I've been just extraordinarily fortunate, especially because most of these guys are just phenomenal human beings. You know, getting to play with Drewskie or Wolfpack, who does a lot of sub sims and air combat sims.
Okay.
Friendly Nikolai, who was around for a long time, who needs to come back. I haven't seen him in a while. And just it's been wild, especially just, you know, like going back to just the trend of people. Like so much of this has just ended up being about meeting awesome people and having these friendships that I have no doubt will last a lifetime.
Yeah. And, you know, something to sort of spin into this. So I've had Deadly Slob on and Markstrom, and, you know, they're part of the marksman team, which, you know, Deadly was talking about, you know, when you're in this field, you know, having peers that you can bounce ideas off or just vent to is so important, because people outside that circle, they have no clue what content creators go through, some of the struggles and, you know, the brain farts you run into. So for you to have, you know, those peers, it's got to be, you know, a good thing to have.
Yeah, it is very healthy. Because you certainly share the frustrations. You also share stuff you're excited about. Like, and I'm sure he'll appreciate me saying this. Karkakut, like, just 30 minutes before we got on here, sent me like a 10-second clip, with just like a simple little caption, that I've no doubt will appear in his next video of a them basically one of his cog operators surprising another player with a machine gun at point blank range in Arma, which is like extraordinarily difficult to do. And I can't wait to see like the context of it. So like, it's cool to see stuff like that where people are really excited about something. They just need to share it with friends like right away. And you know, like Bluedrake and I have talked about dad stuff. Like, hey, we have kids similar age. Like, we're dealing with this. What did you do? You know, so whether it's like life stuff, nerd stuff, content stuff, there's always it's good to have peers for sure.
Absolutely. And now something any plans on streaming, any live streaming, or you really just stick to the sort of YouTube stuff?
I've done some streaming. I love the interaction with the audience. It's a job.
Yeah.
Like streaming is a job. You have to have a schedule. I have to show up. I've got to do it for a certain amount of time. I have 2 young kids in my house. I have a day job. If I was to start streaming, I would do none of the other stuff that I'm juggling. So as much as I would love to do that, I think it would detract from all the things that I put more value in.
Yeah, absolutely. And now from a content creation side, we talked about Drewskie, Karkakut, Bluedrake. Anybody flying under the radar that you know people should check out?
Yeah, so friends of mine, especially, so G-Man, who's one of my mods, he's like the comedic relief in all my videos, but he's also a stellar individual. But he's freaking hilarious. He has his own channel that is growing and doing well. He recently got monetized, which was a big win for him. The Butter Anvil, who also hangs out in my Discord quite a bit, is worth looking up. He does phenomenal hot takes and analysis in the space that is without pretense and uninfluenced by the opinions of others. So sometimes his hot takes are extraordinarily contentious, and sometimes they'll provide a perspective that you probably have not considered. But he's extremely analytical and intelligent and articulate, and explains his position well and does it in a compelling manner. So those are the 2 that pop up.
All right.
You know, kind of like top of mind.
Cool. Any games you're looking forward to getting your hands on and you know playing?
Yeah, so Geronimo's definitely like top of my list right now. I'd say like some close seconds. I'm looking forward to the Door Kickers full release. Haven't heard from them in a little bit, so I'm excited to know when version 1.0 of that game finally launches and what new features are included in it. And then kind of like not a game, but a feature. So if you follow Flat to VR at all on Twitter, Prey Dog has been working on a VR mod that works with like everything. It's not actually everything, but it feels like everything.
Yeah.
So he's proved that his VR mod works with Squad recently.
Wow.
In this same group of folks has already done like they did Half-Life into VR. There's word of a version of Ready or Not that may make its way to VR. So like a mod like that, if the integration works well, could take all these experiences we know and love and make them accessible in virtual reality, which I think would have a profound impact in the space.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. All right. So now, you know, when you're not making content, you know, you're being a dad, working full time. What do you do to relax? You know, end of the night, are you throwing on some TV, or are you just like listening to music and hanging with the wife?
Oh man, I'm trying to like think if I do relax, if that happens. No, like all my friends, you know, real world and in Discord are constantly wondering when I sleep. And I ask myself that question sometimes. It's tough. So I'll give you 2 answers. Like the first answer is I am at peace when I'm doing things that I love. And so I love content. And if I pour myself into it entirely, that is relaxing. It is satisfying. It is enjoyable. I like the editing process. I like designing thumbnails. I like thinking of titles. I like recording videos with my friends and making something and putting it out there for the world. I find that process relaxing, but there's no doubt that it's still work to a certain degree.
Yeah.
And then the second half, and the rest of my life is consumed. I'm doing some grad school stuff right now. I'm doing a day job right now. I'm doing the dad stuff, the husband stuff. So I'm extraordinarily busy. But I'd say spending like quality one-on-one time with my wife specifically is extraordinarily like that is my place of peace. And I always cut out several nights a week where it's like I'm not going to work on anything. We're just going to hang out. We're going to watch a show. We're going to watch a movie, or we'll turn the TV off and we'll just talk. And I think that that's really, really important to invest in. And, I almost included my kids there, but there's nothing relaxing about that.
Not at this age.
I love my kids with all my heart, and they are the most important thing in my life, hands down. But they are not relaxing. There are a lot of other amazing things, but they are not relaxing.
Absolutely. So any plans or, goals you're looking forward to knocking out this year?
Yeah, all of them. No, I've got another kind of a big family transition point coming up that I've got to get through.
Yeah.
Finishing up this chunk of grad school is certainly top of mind right now. On the content front, I set some goals that I hold myself accountable to, and there's some stuff in the shooting space, the fitness space, the academic space, and then like the personal space. Yeah. On the content creator side, like I set a revenue goal for myself, not because money matters as much as a goal about money would indicate, but because it keeps me on track and centered. And the income I make from, doing the content creator stuff does help my family. It doesn't get us rich by any stretch, but like it absolutely does take some pressure off, and it means a lot to my family. So being able to hit those goals does a lot at home. Yeah.
Excellent.
So, but if you want to hold me accountable for my goals, I make it an annual habit of pinning it to my Twitter, so people remind me not to be a piece of shit every few weeks.
Well, hey, you survived the podcast, and I thank you so much for doing this. But before I let you go, though, you've got to shout out somebody who you think has a good story that could, would come on and talk about themselves.
Oh man, I think Karkakut's the guy. I really do. He is a fan of podcasts. I will make him listen to this one. He has come on my podcast before.
Yeah.
He is a joy to listening to, and I think that you pose a lot of really good questions that he would be well equipped to answer, and your listeners and your viewers would get a lot out of.
Awesome. All right. Well, there we go. Karkakut's coming on.
There we go. We'll make it happen.
Well, thank you so much for doing this, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
All righty, sir. I had a blast. Thanks so much for having me.